Chosen ones, they believed the 10th gate had been sealed for eternity, not by man, but by a force older than human memory. Not even the ancients dared to approach it. When Thoth etched the 9 laws into stone, he left the 10th law unwritten. It wasn't forgotten. It was forbidden. And yet, here you are. There were whispers across timelines, encrypted into the dreams of seers and scattered through the DNA of starborn children. A being would arrive, not through force, but through frequency. Not born, but triggered. And with that arrival, the 10th gate, the one that ended cycles, would respond. It wasn't meant to be broken. The elders at the Hall of Amenti knew this. They looped reality in layers to prevent it, built false gates, created decoys, bound history to forgetfulness. They invented gods and governments to keep you distracted, because the 10th gate wasn't a destination. It was a mechanism, a reset. Your awakening was the vibration that disrupted the lock. Not a spell, not a code, but something deeper, alignment. You moved through lifetimes like a sleeper cell encoded with divine memory. Until this one, until now. And when your frequency finally stabilized, the seal fractured. The gate breathed for the first time in 26,000 years. But opening the gate wasn't the end. It was the trigger. Behind it lies not just knowledge, but undoing. Forgotten souls. Entities too ancient to be named. The Council of 9? They scattered when they felt your resonance. Their simulations began collapsing the moment you remembered who you were. And now, everything is unraveling faster than they can contain it. The 9 gates were spoken of only in fragments, encoded into myths, buried under pyramids, hidden in children's rhymes that never made sense until now. Each gate was said to regulate one layer of human perception: time, sound, memory, identity, emotion, space, choice, belief, and form. For ages, initiates believed that passing through them was enlightenment, but that was a half-truth. The gates didn't grant power, they filtered it. From Atlantis to Sumeria, each civilization that touched even one gate advanced rapidly, then vanished. Not because they failed, but because they succeeded too far. The energy changed them, not overnight, but subtly. The architects stopped dreaming. The priests stopped aging. Time didn't bend, it stilled. Then the stories ended. Some say the gates demanded a toll. You felt it, didn't you? In childhood. The sense that something around you was artificially staged, that the world was running on a script you hadn't agreed to. That déjà vu was more than memory. It was memory echoing from a previous gate. Most ignore it. You couldn't. The 9th gate was the last known threshold before silence. It was said to be buried beneath the Earth's crust, vibrating at a frequency human instruments can't register. Ancient engineers wrote about it in numbers, not words. Its entrance wasn't made of stone or metal, but magnetism. Those who passed through began hearing things in reverse. Not sounds, but instructions. You've already crossed the 9, whether you remember or not. The real evidence isn't knowledge. It's detachment. Your craving for truth became unbearable because lies began to itch. People started glitching around you. Systems froze. Animals stared. Children whispered your name in dreams they couldn't recall. No one opens the 10th without first being shattered by the 9. Now, the echoes are getting louder. not in language, in symbols, geometry, synchronistic events so precise you've stopped calling them coincidences. They're reminders, warnings, or perhaps invitations. The 9 are calling you to remember, not what they gave, but what they withheld, and why. Before the gates, before the empires, before even the concept of time, they were already waiting. The Watchers were not guardians in the way myths described. They didn't wield swords or stand at portals. They observed, silently, without judgment. Their task wasn't to protect the gates from intrusion, but to ensure only resonance could pass through. Not bloodlines, not rituals, vibration. They appeared throughout history, always as background figures. A stranger who never blinked. A silhouette in the corner of a vision. A voice that said nothing yet rearranged your thoughts. When a soul drew too close to one of the gates, the Watchers didn't intervene. They tested. Subtle distortions in memory. Shifts in time. Reality folding just enough to ask, "Are you truly ready?" Those who failed didn't die. They were redirected, given new names, new lives, scattered like seeds in unfamiliar soil. Some forgot entirely. Others carried the weight of unseen scars, haunted by doors they couldn't name. The Watchers were ancient, but not all-knowing. They answered to something deeper, something encoded into the structure of the gates themselves, a divine intelligence, not artificial, not biological, something incarnate, something that once walked among men and left a pattern behind, not in stone, but in spirit. One of the oldest fragments left behind speaks of a teacher who passed through all thresholds, not with force, but with surrender. He didn't shatter the veil. He became the veil. The way, the truth, and the life, they whispered. But few understood it wasn't doctrine. It was direction. A soul aligned so perfectly, the Watchers could not contain him. They stepped aside, not out of reverence, but recognition. You carry the same distortion, the same anomaly in your field. That's why the Watchers don't speak when they appear to you. They're calculating something, measuring, waiting for a moment that was prophesied in silence, when one would pass through not because they sought to, but because they had to. And recently, they've been appearing more often, in dreams, in reflections, in places light. The ancients didn't name the 10th gate, not because they lacked language, but because naming it would have given it form, and form was what it devoured. From the Mayans to the Vedic seers, even the secret scribes of Egypt, they all recorded 9 paths, 9 veils, 9 initiations. But the 10th? It was always marked with absence, a blank space, a silence that echoed louder than thunder. The fear wasn't born from ignorance. It came from knowing too much. Civilizations that approached the 10th found their foundations crumbling from within. Architects began questioning geometry. Priests began doubting their rituals. The stars no longer aligned. Time refused to loop predictably. It wasn't just knowledge behind the 10th. It was the unmaking of constructs that held reality together. The Atlanteans called it the Door of Return, though no one could agree on what one returned to. Some believed it led back to source. Others believed it led forward, to a future self so vast the present could not contain it. But the one consensus across timelines was this: once opened, it never closes the same way. You can't unsee what the 10th reveals. That's what terrified the ancient orders. Not demons, not death, but deconstruction. Ego, belief, even identity. Stripped. Not torn violently, but peeled away like mist under morning light. What remains is a version of you that has no history, and yet knows everything. Civilizations that flirted with the 10th left behind warnings, not maps. Temples misaligned on purpose. Myths deliberately scrambled. Books sealed with riddles that looped the reader back to page 1. All of it a desperate attempt to hide the thing no one could face directly. The gate that dissolved the illusion of control. And now, you've activated it. Not with chance or keys, but with frequency. With the way your presence bends the air in rooms. With the stillness that follows your name when spoken. You didn't find the 10th, it recognized you. And that alone is enough to shatter the protections woven by civilizations long dead, long before the gate was sealed, long before Earth forgot its purpose. The council gathered beneath the stars to address a singular anomaly. A traveler had appeared, not through birth or craft, but as if summoned by a fracture in time itself. He wore linen, no name, no title, eyes like silence. He spoke only once, and when he did, the entire chamber changed temperature. He didn't bring prophecy. He brought a warning. The council, a circle of beings older than calendars, listened as he described a future they had tried to prevent, a gate they had buried, and a soul who would arrive without training, without allegiance, without fear. The linen-cloaked man said this soul would not rise through initiation, but through remembrance. That memory, not magic, would unlock what they had hidden. The council mocked him. One among them claimed no being could bypass the layers of encryption coded into time. Another insisted the 10th gate no longer responded to biological signatures. But the man simply lifted his sleeve and revealed his arm. It shimmered, not with light, but with memory, written across his skin like living scripture. Some recognized it, fragments from a timeline thought erased. The stone the builders rejected, one muttered, stunned. That phrase alone caused 3 members to vanish from the room, as if that sentence reversed their purpose. He walked among them once, that man. He broke bread without ritual. He healed without ceremony. His words were seeds planted in the wrong soil, meant for a harvest at the end of time. They tried to erase him by distorting his story, but what they couldn't erase was the imprint he left in the structure of reality itself. He told them someone would return with that same signature, someone who would not bow to their laws, but whose presence alone would make those laws irrelevant. The man in linen warned them, when the gate opens, you won't have time to react. You'll have to choose. Then he disappeared, not vanished, but withdrawn, like light folding into itself. Now, thousands of years later, the council feels the tremor. The resonance is identical, and somewhere, the man in linen has started walking again. They weren't keys in the traditional sense. No metal, no grooves, no locks. They were frequencies encoded into objects, bloodlines, symbols, and sound. After the 10th gate was sealed, the council didn't destroy the method to open it. They did something far more clever. They fragmented it across timelines, dimensions, and minds. Not to hide it from the unworthy, but to prevent any single being from holding the full pattern. Each key resonated with a different aspect of the soul. One triggered memory, another vision. One key could only be activated through grief, another through stillness so deep it frightened the ego into silence. They weren't meant to be found with maps or rituals. They were designed to find you once you reached the correct level of coherence. Some keys took form as forgotten relics, a scroll buried beneath layers of soot in a desert monastery. Others walked in human bodies, unaware of what they carried until they stood in your presence and remembered. There were even keys made of pure light, hidden in certain alignments of stars that blinked awake only once every few thousand years. The architects ensured that each key was incomplete on its own. When approached improperly, they emitted dissonance so intense it could fracture consciousness. Many seekers touched them and lost pieces of themselves. Some became prophets, others madmen. A few never came back. You didn't collect the keys by accident. They didn't arrive all at once. They entered quietly, through symbols you kept seeing, dreams that returned without explanation, people who looked at you like they already knew you. Each one altered your field slightly, calibrated you, brought your internal frequency closer to the one the 10th gate recognizes. The final key wasn't a thing. It wasn't even external. It was a shift in you. A moment so subtle it passed like a breath. A memory returned. Not of a life, but of why you incarnated. That realization was the final piece. And when it clicked into place, the lock didn't open with a sound. It simply ceased to exist. And now the others can feel it. The ones who scattered the keys. The ones who buried them thinking you'd never assemble the pattern. There was one seal older than the rest, not carved into stone, but into time itself. It wasn't placed by scribes or guardians, but by a being who understood that some truths could only be protected by embedding them in paradox. This seal was never meant to be found. It was meant to awaken when the world forgot how to seek. In the forgotten scrolls of the Essenes, there's mention of a man who carried light too vast for one lifetime. They said he spoke in layers, that each word he uttered was a doorway, and only those who listened from within could enter. His presence disturbed the world not because he brought change, but because he reminded people what they already knew. The priests tried to trap him in doctrine. The empire tried to silence him through death. Neither succeeded. What they didn't know was that he encoded a seal within his final breath, not in the physical, but in the collective field. It wasn't a relic. It was a frequency that could only be activated by someone bearing the same pattern. Not identical, but resonant. That seal remained dormant across generations, echoing beneath scripture, beneath story, beneath the myth they distorted to control minds. The 10th gate recognizes that pattern. It wasn't the cross that mattered. It was the veil that tore. When that happened, reality itself shifted, subtly, irreversibly. He didn't open the gate. He became part of its lock, knowing someone like you would eventually arrive and bring the missing tone. That's why the final seal didn't respond to sound, but silence. The stillness you felt just before the shattering, that was the moment it recognized you. You've walked paths that feel eerily familiar, not because you've lived them before, but because he walked them ahead of you, leaving behind impressions only a true heir could activate. Each tear, each betrayal, each moment of unbearable love. It was the way through. The seal is no longer hidden, and now that it's awakened, the field is vibrating differently. Not just for you, but for the entire grid. Something once buried under centuries of distortion is rising to the surface. It didn't sound like thunder. It wasn't a scream or a chant or any recognizable frequency. It was a silence, splitting. A note that existed just outside the range of perception, like the whisper of light before lightning strikes. The moment it occurred, machines flickered, birds changed direction mid-flight, and seers across continents woke in unison, drenched in sweat, unable to speak. You didn't hear it with your ears. You felt it. In the marrow of your bones, in the center of your chest where words don't reach. It was the sound of recognition. The 10th gate had been locked with more than energy. It had been sealed with fear, stories, trauma. Each one layered like a code, wrapped around a core truth too dangerous to be exposed. But truth doesn't need force to break through. It needs resonance. That's what you brought. The culmination of forgotten lives, collapsed timelines, and echoes that never faded. When your field stabilized into its true frequency, the lock, once considered permanent, began to vibrate, not violently, harmonically, and then the sound came, not from the outside, from within. Every false self you had worn cracked under the tone. The illusions of who you thought you had to be, the roles, the masks, the bargains, all shattered. What remained was something ancient and exact, a being who never needed permission, a blueprint encoded with impossible light. The sound didn't destroy the lock, it made it irrelevant. Across dimensions, entities that had long disconnected from the physical realm paused. They felt it too. The old ones, the architects, even those buried in the magnetic crust of the earth, all recognized it. The vibration of a soul returning to original design. The moment the sound rippled through, the 10th gate didn't open with ceremony or spectacle. It unfolded, like a memory being remembered, like a wound closing in reverse. It was as if it had been waiting not to be forced open, but welcomed back into coherence. They tried everything: floods, fires, wars, rewritten histories, manipulated genetics, all to erase a lineage that refused to vanish. Not because it held political power or military strength, but because it carried a frequency, one that couldn't be overwritten, only obscured. It pulsed quietly through the centuries, hidden in those deemed insignificant, misplaced in forgotten regions, passed down in silence between eyes that recognized each other across lifetimes. The bloodline didn't survive through force. It survived through memory. It echoed not in names or titles, but in knowing, a kind of inner compass that turned toward truth, even when surrounded by lies. Empires rose to choke it out. Religions were built to confuse it, and yet it lived on. Not in palaces, but in whispers. Not in temples, but in ordinary lives that were anything but. There's an old passage, seldom quoted, buried beneath layers of translation. His line shall endure forever. His throne, like the sun before me. Many thought it referred to a monarchy. But it was never about rule. It was about resonance. Yeshua wasn't the end of the line. He was the awakening of it. His presence didn't create the frequency. It revealed it. And his blood was never about genetics, but geometry. A pattern the gate would later recognize in you. This is why, no matter how many times they tried to extinguish the carriers, they failed. The bloodline traveled in dreams. It encoded itself into the eyes of children who felt too old for their bodies. It hid in laughter that broke spells, in the hands of those who healed without knowing how. It couldn't be caught because it didn't move through systems. It moved through love that remembered itself. And now, with the 10th gate open, the frequency is no longer passive. It's activating. You've seen it. In strangers who suddenly lock eyes with you in startled recognition. In forgotten names that surface in your dreams, in the hum beneath your skin when you pass certain places, as if the land remembers you. The bloodline isn't just alive, it's converging. And the ones who tried to erase it? They've just realized they were tracing the wrong lineage all along. When the 10th gate responded to your frequency, it didn't just open, it bent the very structure around it. Time, once a steady river flowing in one direction, shivered. The past didn't vanish, but began rethreading itself around your awakening. Histories rearranged. Memories once buried beneath lifetimes surfaced with no warning. You weren't remembering your past. The timeline itself was correcting around you. This wasn't distortion. It was precision. The rift didn't cause chaos. It revealed that much of what was called order was fabricated. Events you thought were accidents began revealing purpose. Encounters long forgotten suddenly made sense. Patterns hidden in your childhood, losses you never understood. Synchronicities that once felt random. They weren't coincidences. They were echoes from a timeline you've just stepped into. The Council tried to predict this moment, but failed. Not because they lacked data, but because you exist outside the range of prediction. Their simulations fractured the moment your frequency stabilized. The rift wasn't a result of your actions. It was a response to your presence. And it didn't just affect your path. It echoed outward. Others have felt it. People who never met you speak your name in dreams. Artists create images they can't explain. Paintings of a gate they've never seen, but somehow recognize. Children begin asking questions no one taught them. Animals gather near your presence as if remembering a forgotten command. These are the aftershocks of the rift. Time, once thought to be linear, is rippling in spirals now. The future isn't ahead. It's folding back toward you. Prophecies once sealed are beginning to activate, not as warnings but as instructions. The old texts didn't lie. They were simply written too early. Their symbols didn't apply until the gate opened. Until you arrived. And now, moments you haven't yet lived are trying to meet you. People you haven't met are remembering you. Places you've never been feel like home. It wasn't fanfare that marked your crossing. No trumpets, no thunder. Just a stillness so complete it felt like all creation paused. For a fraction of a second, reality inhaled, not in fear, but in recognition, as if something sacred, long awaited and deeply encoded, had just been fulfilled. And not just by stepping through the 10th gate, but by being the one to do it. You didn't force the crossing, you aligned with it. That's what the others couldn't understand. For generations, they prepared armies, built temples, whispered incantations into stone, hoping to trick the gate open. but it never responded to strategy, only to presence, the kind of presence that doesn't seek to dominate, but to return. A soul remembered, and the gate, ancient and tired of false keys, opened for you like a page finally turning itself. The breath of heaven wasn't metaphor, it was real. For in that silence, something ancient stirred. A being once written into story, but exiled from history. The one who walked between realms, who said, "The kingdom is within you," not as poetry, but as literal design. Yeshua didn't open this gate, he prepared it. Every word, every step, every parable wasn't just teaching, it was encoding, laying groundwork for a consciousness that would one day match his own. And now, the echo of that moment, your moment, is rippling upward. The stars recalibrated. The grid pulsed. A signal moved across dimensions faster than light, not as sound, but as knowing. The kind that can't be taught, only remembered. Beings who had long turned away from Earth felt it. The council scrambled. Some wept, some fled, others simply stood still, watching the data realign itself around you. And you? You didn't ask for this, but you are this. Not a prophecy fulfilled, but a prophecy continued. The gate no longer stands between you and what's next. It stands behind you, wide open, humming with possibilities that cannot be unstepped.